get there.
I'm gonna get there.
This cannot be a 2-hour episode, homie.
This is gonna be however long it's going.
We're gonna have to edit your butt. I am Zuri, and this is your invitation to be the beautiful you. Welcome to our podcast. My co-host and partner is expansion coach Mikey Starr.
And she's lifestyle coach Zuri Starr. And together, we make the EmPOWERment couple.
We are the founders of the Om the Media organic lifestyle company, I Am Zuri. And we've teamed up to bring you a healthy lifestyle podcast.
Each week, we'll bring you either a special guest or a peek behind the scenes at how we are co-creating our most beautiful life. Our goal is to energize, edify, and elevate your day.
Walk with us as we chart a course to living your most beautiful life.
Your most beautiful life.
Never do that again. This episode's going to be about moving to Vermont.
We're moving to Vermont.
So we moved to Vermont.
From?
California, born and raised.
Big change, big change.
And the reaction we usually get from people is like, what? Why?
Why?
We don't get it. And the number one answer that Mike came up with shortly after we moved is what?
We traded traffic for trees.
And that couldn't be more true.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive right in and talk about this adventure to the East Coast as the Californians.
The Californians.
So funny factoid, beautiful factoid, actually, on that note of trading traffic for trees is, did you know that the population of the state of Vermont is just a little bit over 600,000 people?
Wow.
Whereas California, our home state where we were both born, raised, and lived until a couple years ago, 39.5 million. Yeah. Big state, but lots of people. But specifically, we last lived in LA County, and there's 4 million people there.
Just 4 million.
Just 4 million. So, I mean, we lived in a town in LA County, and that town had about 800,000.
Wow.
Yeah. But surrounded by other towns that had 800,000 and so on and so forth, right? So, okay.
And all those towns blended into one another.
They're all like one mega hub. Whereas we live in this little cute little town that has, are you ready for this? 2,561 people. What? No traffic lights. Stop signs, yes, but no traffic lights.
And we have 2 covered bridges.
We do have 2 covered bridges.
Made of wood.
Yes. But did you know that LA has the worst traffic in the U.S. for 6 years running? The worst. Here's another beautiful factoid is that drivers in and around LA, which was us, spent 102 hours battling traffic congestion during peak hours in 2017. 102.
The 101, the 405, the 110.
The 605, the 5.
Traveled them all.
Did you take Sunset, and then did you take...
Oh, my goodness.
We'll share... We poke a lot about the Californians because we are Californians, and we get made fun of quite a bit since moving here. But also we reference like the SNL skit of Californians. If you haven't seen it, it could be your 10 minutes of laughter that we recommend every day. But let's just talk about it. So diving right in, people ask us these questions all the time. You know, were you thriving in LA?
You know what? I wasn't thriving in the way that I knew I could. Right. And for me, it was that I'm a huge sponge, right? I absorb everything that I see. And what I saw was just a lot of mixed messages in regards to happiness. To answer your question, I wasn't thriving at the level that I wanted to thrive. I was suffering more than I was thriving.
And what do we say about suffering?
Suffering is for suckers.
Ooh, child.
Right? Now, when I say suffer, I'm not talking about suffering from, mental illness or, disease.
You're talking about emotional suffering when you're like in a bad mood, not in control of your mindset. You're healthy. You're not being deliberate with your mindset and your emotional state, right?
That, and I felt like suffering for me was not getting exactly what I wanted.
Yeah.
And what I wanted was more space. Totally. I wanted to take a nice deep breath. I wanted to see seasons. I wanted to, feel what the natural world felt like.
Yeah. So, and to be fair, you came from that area. You lived in that area your whole life, mm-hmm. and you traveled the world from being in the military. And I also spent my whole life in California. But I think at that point we had raised our standards. So yes. We really had raised our standards and decided there were certain things that we wanted that we weren't going to get there unless we had Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie type money to buy a compound. And, mm-hmm. Even then it wouldn't have been our ideal place to continue our adventuring. Yeah. So this is just, I'm in love with the little factoids, but the funny thing about Vermont is it's the only U.S. capital, the only state that has a U.S. capital that doesn't have a McDonald's.
What?
Isn't that funny?
Man.
Yeah, I know. I saw that. I was like, oh, that's hilarious. That's not something that I would have thought. I mean, we have McDonald's. I think there's McDonald's in the state, but
yes.
Right? Well, maybe that's New Hampshire. I'm not sure. But anyway, we should look that up. But I know that we just got a Target in the state, mm-hmm. and that was a big deal. There's only mm-hmm. one in the state. Granted, you drive 10 minutes, you're in New Hampshire. All the states are very small back here.
They bleed into each other.
Right. And then the ratio of cows to people is really funny. Vermont has the greatest number of dairy cows in the country, and Montpelier, which is our state capital that doesn't have a McDonald's, they're the largest producer of maple syrup.
Now, I love maple syrup, but I am lactose intolerant.
Yeah, but that's okay. And
I don't eat cows.
And a lot of the dairies in Vermont are organic, mm-hmm. and they are actually raising their cows mm-hmm. On a pasture, and a lot of them aren't too, so we can talk about that more in other episodes. But why did you move? Let's just dive right in there. Why did you move?
Well, I practice I did something. I practice what I call forecasting happiness, right? Where I thought of all the things that I would consider that a lifestyle of happiness, and the things that I didn't currently have, I forecasted in the future, is this even going to be available to me? Will I have the opportunity to walk my dogs on a big piece of property, or do I have to go to the local dog park and deal with, all the dog poop and the
weird people,
the people who are just sitting at the dog park smoking cigarettes. I'm like, ugh. So, and I used vision boards. I really kind of detailed what it is that I wanted in my life. And I realized that it wasn't going to be made possible where we lived.
But to be clear, where we lived, we paid a lot of money to live there. Mm-hmm. We had we had a 4-bedroom house, 2-story, huge yard. We had a nice home. Mm-hmm. And by many people's standards, this would have been more than enough to feel like they could live there for several years and be happy. And it's more than a lot of Southern Californians have.
That is correct.
So I want to just make the distinction that there was nothing wrong with it, but we changed, and so we had to change our environment.
Indeed. And when it comes to happiness, it is an individual practice. Right. So your happiness isn't based on someone else's views. Like, I wanted to be able to go out in the woods and not see stucco homes all around.
Yep. And it's like the things that we like the most, you couldn't do, right? So
why did you move? What was spurring you?
So for me, I felt like I couldn't really walk my talk. You know, I grew up on a farm. I was raised with a lot of consciousness about, my father was a, organic farmer. My mom was like a yoga instructor. And there are a lot of people who fit into those categories in Southern California that are interested in those things. But I wanted to be able to grow my own food on a level that I had like a huge garden and I wasn't renting or subjected to what my neighbors were spraying on their garden. Like I had a different idea in mind of what I wanted for myself. And, you can't deny the effects of pollution. You can't deny that we were living in a place where they pump all their water in. There are just too many things that I had built a business, and then we built a second business that we didn't have to live there.
Yeah.
Granted, every single time that there's something going on in California, I'm going to have to fly back and carbon footprint. There are trade-offs for sure. But
our whole family lives there. So.
Yeah, and our family lives there. But it was like, I wanted to walk my talk and like have a home and have property and have a garden and have a different adventure. Maybe not permanently, because nothing is permanent, but really like just see what it was like. So that was, at the core of it. But also financially, we were wasting money on rent.
Oh my goodness.
Our families own properties and stuff like that. But where we wanted to live, it was extremely expensive. We were living in like, $1 million home. So you're then paying their mortgage. They probably bought the house for $450,000, or actually we know they did. But the prices were going up so much, and like our quality of life just seemed like it was diminishing more and more. People were moving in next to us. There was starting to be more crime. There were things that were telling us lobster is what I would say. I'm looking at you, and we both would look at each other and we're like, lobster. And so you want to touch on that?
Every day at 3:00, no matter if it was Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we would be blessed with the sounds of leaf blowers and, lawnmowers, and just, it was just this sound pollution that was just constant chaos. Wi-Fi, you go to log in your Wi-Fi, there's no turning it off when you live in a city or suburbia. It's like you're neck and neck with people. It's the trading traffic for trees. I mean, we did have trees around us, and we lived in a canyon, so it was beautiful. It was pretty.
But
great mountain biking.
Right. There's so many things that we could say that's great about it. But anyway, let's continue about parenting. Was obviously we're both parents, and to a daughter that was starting to enter into that middle school age. So just ahead of that, we were thinking like, hey, I grew up on a farm, and I know you didn't, but you grew up in an area that had a lot of nature around it. So you grew up in a farming community.
Correct.
You were able to experience nature and, how that played a role for you in your life. And I really felt like, my California family wasn't farming anymore. So my grandfather had retired. I wanted to live somewhere where they were farming, and she could be on a farm and know where her food came from, and also grow her own food, not just our tomatoes and lettuce and stuff in the backyard, and like we were doing, but like and
unfortunately most of the farmlands that surrounded my house that I grew up in are now housing tracts.
Right. So her upbringing, like I wanted her to have nature instead of materialism all around her. And here's another factoid. Vermont doesn't have any billboards.
Say that again, one more time.
Vermont, it is illegal in the state of Vermont to advertise with a billboard on the side of the road.
So therefore, when you're driving, you are seeing hills, trees, lakes, rivers. You're not seeing any signs talking about prescription medications.
Or plastic surgery.
Or alcohol.
Or get your Big Mac at McDonald's.
Or you have to buy this so you can be like this.
Or we could go on all day.
All day long.
Because if you live in that part where we lived, it was all advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And, just what effect is that having on your child's mind? If they're looking to be like their surroundings, which we are, that's just, they're growing, you're modeling behavior for them.
Mm-hmm.
And, she went to an amazing school. She had amazing peers.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about our friendships were great, but it's just the environment. We felt like this would be a really great time to let her experience more nature versus materialism and kind of where we saw, that age range going. And
she can always come back to the city.
Totally.
But we wanted her to grow up amongst the trees.
Yeah, and have here there's academies, and she could get a private school education. There's a high focus on intellectual ability and
small classroom size.
Yeah, so that it kind of for us was a no-brainer, and she said yes. She wanted to adventure, and if she had said no, then we would have figured out what we were going to do instead. Yeah. So as a family, we decided, hey, let's adventure and see what it's like living in Vermont. And why Vermont too, obviously, is that my dad has a farm here that he has co-managed for the last 20 years. Mike and I got married on the farm. It's a organic farm. It's been certified since 2003. It is an educational center. They have an organic coffee shop, an amazing CSA, like an ATM program where you can swipe your card to get organic produce. And like I said, education center, and they have a kitchen, and they also have a program called Willing Hands that helps people who can't afford to grow their own food. So, I mean, I could do a whole show about
hub.
Cedar Circle Farm, and we will have people from the farm on our podcast. And I thought, I worked on the farm. Mike worked on the farm at different times. Zarel took her first steps on the farm because we lived briefly in Vermont for about 6 months during one of their growing seasons. And, that kind of sealed it. Like, well, let's go back, buy some property, be around my dad. My dad's in his 80s, and you'd think he's in his 60s because he still is, doing
no medications.
Yeah.
Just driving.
He's pretty awesome. So he will be on the show quite a bit. So we had made up our mind, and then it came time to, oh crap, how are we going to do this? Because Mike and I had moved a lot in California, of course. If you're renting, you're moving every year, every 2 years. You just are, unless you're in some type of rent control, which almost doesn't exist, or you're living, at a place where, you grow and then you outgrow places, right? So we had moved a lot. But from one place to one place with the U-Haul truck or, with a moving company. It was not across the entire United States.
Oh my goodness.
So how did we move? Oh, with a lot of funny stories. And
lots of funny stories.
I think you should tell maybe the first one, but I don't know. Do you want to talk about how the movers came over?
Well, the every part of the process was a practice of letting go, right? So we had this thought that our move is going to go a specific way, and it didn't. it went the way that it went.
It went the way that it went.
So we went from having movers come in, pack up our house.
We had this idea. We're like, this is going to be so easy. We're going to hire these movers. They're going to come in. They're going to pack our stuff. And then they're going to drive it across. We'll meet them there. And let me just tell you that is not how it works out. I now have like watched enough YouTube channels and researched enough to know that those don't exist. Mind you, we looked it was my birthday in April. We were looking for a house in California. My dad came, he planted a little seed about Vermont. Then we were like, And then we started looking at houses in Vermont. Flew to Vermont, looked at houses, fell in love with a house, put an offer, they accepted, and then we were in escrow, and we were like, okay, we have to pack up our entire house. Four bedrooms.
2-car garage.
I think like 2,300 square foot house.
It was a big house.
We had to pack it all up.
Yes.
And we had been, accumulating stuff for the last 15 years.
We had some nice furniture pieces. Years.
Yes, we had lots of stuff. Mm-hmm. But so we looked at things and we had to do the whole Marie Kondo, what sparks joy. And there were certain things that I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And then, once we got here, I was like, why didn't we bring this? And so we made a lot of silly decisions because we didn't have movers. Our movers showed up. They did a bait and switch. They basically told us one price and came over with these shady people walking through our home, almost as if they were going to come back the next day and steal it, or they were just going to put it on their truck and you'd never see it again.
Yes.
And it was so shady. They were like holding open the door. I was literally forcing them out of the house. Like, you cannot be in charge of our move. I just had bad juju.
And mind you.
And Mike's like, well, what if we get rid of them? What the heck are we going to do?
And that was moving day.
Yeah.
That was moving day. And we went from that was early in the morning. And an hour after they left, I was at the local U-Haul. And I managed to get a
32-foot truck.
A 32-foot truck. And a trailer, because we wanted to bring our Prius.
Yep.
So I went from flying with 2 dogs and 2 cats.
Yep.
With you and Zarel to literally driving a huge U-Haul, which biggest truck I've ever driven, pulling a trailer. Never pulled a trailer with 2 dogs in the cab. Not a backseat cab, just a cab.
Yeah.
And I can drive no faster than 65 miles an hour.
And this story is hilarious for a lot of reasons. So I'm not going to interrupt Mike. I'm going to let him just go. But we do have photos of all of this. So be sure to tune into our website where we have a blog and a little slideshow about all of this, because it, a picture says 1,000 words.
Well, all I can say is day 2, I'm driving through Utah, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is the summertime.
Yeah, just below Salt Lake. And this massive storm rolls down this huge mountain range that I was driving past. And it was literally pushing my truck to the left, so much so that I had to counter steer to the right. Right? So I'm counter steering, and I'm looking at my left rear view just to make sure that I'm not going over my line. And lo and behold, I see this big blue kayak flying, behind me, and just landing on the road and almost falling into pieces. And I'm like, oh, snap. There goes my kayak. So we had
a 2-person ocean kayak strapped to the top of our vehicle, which is on the trailer behind his truck. Just for clarity, once he saw that gone, there's no stopping and pulling over in the middle of a lightning storm, right?
That, and it's a major trucker highway. So,
right.
I'm doing 65 miles an hour. I can go in no faster. There's a governor on it. All the other semis were doing 80, 90. If we had gotten passed by a semi going that fast, it's frightening.
Yeah.
That was my whole trip. And I went through at least 4 major storms. You know, you get out in the open highway in the grain belt, what do you call it? And my goodness, I was sweating the whole way. And then, you know, of course, my dogs were whining and farting and you know, fighting with each other. I have a puggle and a
boxer,
a puppy boxer. It was maddening. It was maddening.
You were a trooper. It made you tough. And every night when he would finish kind of like getting close to wanting to stop, you know, for the day, stop driving, he would call me and be like, okay, find me a hotel. So, I mean, he really, he put in the time.
Pet-friendly hotel.
Right. So the other side of what was happening on my end is I was picking up basically just traveled with a suitcase. Everything else was on the truck. So, and 2 cats. One was a kitten that we had just rescued. Long story about that. But yes, we were crazy. We rescued a kitten knowing that we were going to move. And we had another rescue cat that was pretty much, when we got him, wild and kind of never really tamed himself. Like
he's an outdoor cat.
He is an outdoor wild cat. He would challenge a coyote. Like he's very aggressive and big and didn't really have a lot of fear. So I decided to bring that cat with me because it wasn't an option to take him in the truck with the 2 dogs. So he came with me, and in a mesh cat carrier, because that's what the airline required, which I thought, gosh, that seems like a mistake. How is he not going to, you know, go crazy in there, because it has to fit underneath your seat. And I thought, this is just bizarre, because this poor little guy hates being enclosed in anything. He won't even, I mean, we had to have a window open for him to like get in and out of our garage. Like he will not handle staying in one spot, which I knew going into it. So I was like, what am I going to do? And the vet that we had gone to was like, oh, give him some kitty Prozac. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to drug my cat. I had these like little calm chews with ashwagandha and, you know, like herbs, and yeah, he plowed through a couple of those. But by mid-flight, the cat was on my lap, had chewed out of its case. Thankfully, the person sitting just to the left of me, because I had a window seat, he actually, and my daughter, I had a window seat, but my daughter was sitting on the window. And so thankfully, he hid the fact that the cat climbed out, chewed out, and then climbed out and was on my lap, and he was a cat lover. Otherwise, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe they would have landed the plane. I mean, in my mind, I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, this cat is on my lap. I have no way to carry him out. And I thankfully had an extra carrier, like another mesh carrier, simply because I got 2 and one was smaller than the other. So I had to put him in the smaller one, and I had to ditch the other one because I was like, I can't carry 3 carriers. And anyway, so the kitten was fine, and I was able to get them both safely to our new house, but not without having... I mean, I had scratch marks and bite marks all on my leg. He wasn't mad at me. He was just freaked out. And yeah, so.
You ended up chewing on some of those kitty chews, didn't you?
I was like, why didn't I get the kitty Prozac? No, just kidding. No, I didn't. But, you know, a lot of deep breaths. And I was in such a zone during moving about, you know, getting it done that I didn't allow myself to get really caught up in the cat drama. I was just like, okay, I can get through this. And it helped that I didn't have somebody who was, you know, really awful next to me.
Yeah.
So tell me, I think what would be interesting for listeners is, you know, we talk a lot about cord cutting and what that means, you know, for both of us, the importance of being, you know, weightless. So releasing attachments. And we definitely had our moments after we moved, like, where is this? you got rid of this? I mean, a lot of things got given to our neighbors, from like brand new refrigerator to my cheese board that I still haven't found,
all of our succulents.
I mean, just so much was given away, but it allowed us to really not only gift things to people that we loved, but also to kind of release attachments. So we did a lot of cord cutting. I don't know if you want to say more about that, but
yeah. No, you summed it up beautifully. There were things that, that mountain bike that I gave up. I'm still missing it. My first mountain bike, I had a lot of joy.
Who got that one? The neighbor?
Our neighbor.
Yeah, they got a lot of stuff.
He came in, and
we had a lot of neighbors, and they had a lot of kids, and we made it a really nice, Christmas, birthdays. We covered the next 5 years of their lives.
I do miss those neighbors. We had the type of neighbors who showed up just to help us move.
Yeah, they were good people. Yeah. Lots of good people. We definitely attract a lot of good people. So tell me, what's beautiful about living in Vermont?
Well, I finally had the opportunity to decompress. So born and raised in California, I knew nothing else but California. I
Other
traveled.
Than traveling, right?
I traveled with, in the military. I saw, all kinds of cool places. But for the most part, I always felt like I had, like I was in an overcrowded elevator, right? And I just really needed to get out. I needed to get out. And once I moved to Vermont, I spent a lot of time outdoors, mowing lawns, trimming our, trimming all the bushes. Like, when we got here, our property had been overgrown for, a good 2 years. And at the time I was thinking like, oh my goodness, I got to do all this work, but I loved it.
Yeah.
Like I had my hands in the soil, and I really allowed myself to let go of a lot of pent up irritations and like I said, I didn't know how stressed I was.
Yep. And for me, I didn't realize how certain things that we were dealing with on a daily basis were making me feel stressed too, like Wi-Fi, I mentioned that, leaf blowers, you mentioned that, traffic, crimes, stuff, and just the general buzz and consciousness that you feel if you are a sensitive, tuned in person. You feel that, right? And it didn't bother me, and I wouldn't have said that until we moved here, and then it was just like silence, or the creek. We have a big creek on our property, the sound of the creek, and it just, I think it healed me in ways that I didn't know I needed to be healed.
Yeah.
And watching fireflies or shooting stars, there was just like things that I feel like we were only kind of doing on vacation. Not to say that we were hiking and we were watching sunsets on the beach, and we were doing all the things. I miss the beach. I miss the ocean. I say it all the time. I miss my family, the ocean, and our friends. And that's about it. Like, I miss Erewhon, which is our organic store that we lived very close to. But, we rebirthed a little bit here is what I noticed, that we spent a lot of time, especially in the winter, because we had time to just be indoors together, sitting by the fire, that we really, I think, like let go of a lot of stuff. So that whole, you didn't end up touching on it, but lobster, like, there's this theory, well, it's not a theory, but lobsters basically, do you want to touch on this? Or I can, but we'll give them the video of where this came from. You've probably seen it on social media, but it's just the analogy of what lobsters do is they outgrow their shell, and they go and they, slough off their shell, and then they have a new shell. And what we felt like is that we had outgrown our shell, and the video that we're referencing is, if when you feel pain, like you're in your comfort zone, and then you feel pain from growth, that most people will go to the doctor when they feel, pain, when they're discomfort, right? They'll look for a pill, or they'll look for something to help them.
Alcohol, drugs,
right,
TV,
right,
food.
to help, to detach from the pain or to check out, whatever you want to call it. But if we just go through the pain of changing, that we actually, that's where, you know, the change and the pain, the cure is in the pain, right?
The pain is the medicine.
Pain is the medicine. And that if we are denying that all the time, then we aren't really growing in the way that we're supposed to as humans. We're not evolving in the way that we're supposed to. So, you know, we do that with like watching TV, whatever. So I feel like moving here, we had to kind of deal with those changing shells.
Well, let me ask you a question. Who are you able to be now that you were not able to be living in California?
I felt like I didn't have the ability to commit to my true purpose. I felt like there was a lot of noise that I wouldn't, again, have said when I lived there, that there was noise keeping me from being fully in, you know, my space or in my lane or fully available to be successful. I felt that there was noise and clutter in my life that I wasn't able to fully go there, whether, you know, my songwriting career, my singing career, you know, as a recording artist, or my lifestyle company, the social media. Like, I have my hands in so many things, but there was a lot of noise. I think that external noise that comes from living in a city, that it didn't allow me to fully commit and live my true purpose. And like I said, walk my talk. Like I want to live the most beautiful life, and I want to lead that by example. And where I currently was living, and there are beautiful places in California, no diss, I'm sure we'll live there again at some point, even if part-time of the year, whatever. But it where we currently were, I couldn't do what I wanted to do. What about you?
Well, I felt like since we have moved here, I have been able to heal. And by heal, meaning that I didn't, I no longer have to get used to carrying pain around while doing my creative endeavors, right? I was able to heal from my pain, and now I can just focus on my creative endeavors, which is beautiful. I highly recommend finding a way of letting go of some of the baggage that we carry on a regular basis. The other one is that it gave us a chance to travel more so than
to have like seasonal lives. You don't have a seasonal life if you live in Los Angeles, really. I mean, maybe the holidays are seasonal, but the rest of your life is like go, 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 go. And, you know, if you live on the East Coast, you're very close to a large part of the world that we hadn't really explored. So the dream was like, okay, in the winter we'll explore and travel, and we have. Yeah,
I mean, if you live in LA and you want to go to Europe, you're going to stop off in either Boston or New York or Newark or Philly.
Yep.
You know, one of the East Coast cities.
Yep.
Stay for another, hour or two layover, and then you're off. Whereas now...
Or you're on the plane for, 12, 15, 13, 18 hours, depending on where you're going.
And, now we have, we are stone's throw away from Europe or California. Like we can hit either Europe or California
either one
in the same amount of time.
Yep. So our family's not probably crazy about it. I know they often complain about it, but we do spend quite a bit of time in California too. But really, I feel like it would be important for us to touch on moving is change, and what happens if we don't change. Like, want to touch on that a little bit?
Yes. Well, change is hard, right? People don't like changing. And, if you're listening to this story, yes, it's a wild story, going from East Coast to West Coast. I mean, West Coast to East Coast, right?
Yep.
West Coast, total different weather climates and, population density and this and that. And what I'm saying is change doesn't have to be that drastic, right? Change could also be changing out of a bad job, out of a bad relationship,
Because it really forced us outside of our comfort zone, which made us grow. Like, you're meant to grow. Back to the lobster, conversation. Like, you're meant to grow.
Yes.
You're meant to really experience change and go through it so that you aren't stagnant, right?
Exactly. I mean, if the caterpillar were so afraid of change, he would never become a butterfly.
Yes,
right?
yes,
so
yes.
if you find yourself in a situation where, like, man, I wish I just need to change. Listen, if we could travel, or we could relocate our family, how many? 3,000 miles across the United States?
Over 3,000 miles.
You can change whatever it is going on in your life. It's hard. It's difficult.
It poses the question, what's beautiful about adventuring outside of your comfort zone? What's been beautiful for you?
Well, this side of the struggle is great. I mean, I look back at some of the things that I was dealing with back in my home state, and they no longer exist.
Yeah.
Some of the health things that I was dealing with no longer exist. And,
because you're in control of your environment.
My mental, emotional body, spiritual body are so much more tuned in because I have enough time to actually breathe and be happy. So again, change doesn't have to be drastic, but if you know you need to change, don't hesitate.
Yep. And, it goes back to Marie Kondo. What sparks joy? What do you need to get rid of? Do you need to declutter? How do you need to organize your life so that it really feels delicious and beautiful, and, you're thriving, not just surviving? And I saw that a lot around us, just people kind of like, surviving. So, Michael, are you up for a game? I'm going to pretend you said yes. We're going to play a game called What Would a Therapist Say? Nice. That was impressive. So that's like couch music. Ready?
Yes. Get a little hanger on here.
Hey, can we just...
Yes. We're good.
So what would a therapist say about us moving to Vermont?
Maybe they would say... change is good.
Really? That's how you got?
I don't know. What do you got?
Mike hasn't been in as much therapy as I have, clearly.
I fired all my therapists. They clearly didn't work.
Okay, so what I think a therapist would say, it'll be like, so do you think you might be running for something? Do you know when you get there, you'll still have the same problems, right?
You know what? I was actually thinking that, but I wanted to say something positive.
But that's not what a therapist would say.
I'm thinking of a motivational speaker.
Of the game. Yeah.
Okay.
No, a therapist, well, they probably would just sit there and,
scroll.
Yeah, scribble, right? While you're paying
right.
them a lot of money. Swipe right. But I think a therapist would say something like that. Or they'd say, something about, are you just going to get there and then decide that it was a mistake? Maybe you weren't seeing this fully through, something like that.
Okay.
But I just have to tell those therapists that they'd be wrong because I'm super happy.
And yes, so am I. And okay. I grew quite a bit since I've been here.
Yes. Okay.
Not in the belly, but in the mind.
Just in case you wanted people to know that you weren't growing something in your belly? Or...
That's correct.
Okay, good, yeah. All right, that's the end of that game.
Good times.
Yep. You had this great thing that you said the other day about comfort zone, and I don't know if you want to end with that.
I say that the comfort zone is really a fancy description of a ditch, right? Comfort zone, I mean, you get yourself in a ditch or a rut, if you want to call it, and it may be, like I said, a job or a way of thinking or whatnot. But if you if you're so comfy in that zone, you don't have the opportunity to grow. You're not growing if you're comfy. You're only growing if you are uncomfortable. That's the law of nature.
Yeah.
So that's like, for instance, like if you're working out, you're stressing your muscle, you're making your muscle feel uncomfortable, so your muscle strengthens itself.
Right.
So if you are in your comfort zone, see it as a ditch and get out.
Yep. I love it. Well, we hope this inspired you to make changes in your life that help you walk your talk, help you feel like you're not suffering, because suffering is what?
Suffering is for suckers.
And we hope that you create your most beautiful life. We obviously are here to help you with that. And, if you want to trade your traffic for trees, there are many beautiful places you can do that. We chose Vermont, and we hope this was interesting and fun. And one last little story that I will tell is that we didn't know anything. And I want to share this with you because just for perspective, do you remember? It's like November, December, and we ran out of fuel, oil. We ran out of oil, and we're like, I'm in the shower, and in California, everything's central air and heat. You don't think about any of that stuff, right? So you have, propane for your whatever. Like everything's automated. You're paying a couple bills a month, and you're not thinking about that. I mean, you're a homeowner, and on the East Coast where you don't have central air and heat, that just doesn't exist. I'm taking a shower, and I'm like, what? And we have our own well, so I'm like, I kind of really don't even know how all of the stuff works in the house. And we hadn't been here that long, and we didn't have hot water. And I'm like, that's weird. We have a huge, system downstairs that's supposed to give us, hot water all the time. Like that's one of the perks of this system. And we go downstairs, and we're like looking at everything, and we can't figure it out. And then it occurs to us that how the water is heated is through a boiler, which I didn't even know what that was. I had to Google it. So we really didn't know crap. Like, we didn't know whatever. We didn't know shit.
Nothing.
And we were really like the very comical neighbors, to have, our neighbors make fun of us on the reg. And I laughed with them because I just didn't know anything. Like, what? Oh, we have oil that heats up the water that heats up the boiler, and we have propane. And I didn't know any of that stuff. And that's not because I'm not intelligent. I just didn't grow up that way. I didn't grow up with that type of system. So, it's middle of winter and we don't have any oil, and the oil is heating a section of our house, that I wasn't even aware of.
To include our water.
To include our water and to include the, our first level of the 3. And so I didn't know that. I didn't know, and we laughed, and our neighbor laughed at us, and, the people who came and delivered oil laughed at us kind of, but they, were slipping down our driveway because we live on top of a mountain. So let me just say that be brave, be the village idiot. No, just kidding. We're not the village idiot, but our neighbor does call us we stick out, we aren't necessarily the norm around here.
Absolutely not.
So much so that he tells his friends when they ask about us that we're in the witness protection program because we look so, city. And I don't care. I think it's funny. And I just embrace that, hey, we came here to adventure and we are adventuring. And if that means that we make some really dumb mistakes, then who cares? This is it's made us grow so much. And I have a huge smile on my face just thinking about all the funny things. We could talk for hours about them. But I just want to leave you with that last, be brave.
And be able to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep. And have fun. And live your most beautiful life.
Indeed. We hope you received extreme value from this podcast. If you would like to connect with us on a deeper level, You can join our free Tribe subscription newsletter or follow us on social.
And take advantage of our free shopping guides, discounts on products, hacks, and recipes using the links in the show notes. Our aim with every show is to provide you with value, and we welcome your feedback and support. The best way to support us is to click the share button and tell your community about us. You can also subscribe and give us a review. We appreciate you so much for tuning in, and we are honored to help you discover what's beautiful about being you.